In 1973, a film was released that would change horror cinema forever. The Exorcist terrified audiences worldwide with its story of a young girl possessed by a demon. The head spinning, the projectile vomiting, the levitation, the guttural voice speaking in tongues. People fainted in theaters. Some claimed the film itself was cursed. It became the first horror movie ever nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. But what most people don't know is this: The Exorcist wasn't just inspired by a true story. It was a true story. In 1949, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., a 14-year-old boy began experiencing phenomena that defied explanation. Objects moved on their own. Scratches appeared on his skin. Voices spoke through him in languages he'd never learned. The Catholic Church performed over 20 exorcisms on him across 3 months. 48 witnesses watched in horror. One priest was slashed, another had his nose broken. For over 70 years, the boy's identity remained a secret, protected by pseudonyms Roland Doe, Robbie Mannheim, until December 2021, when the truth finally emerged. This is the story of Ronald Edwin Hunkeler, the boy who became the Exorcist. Ronald Edwin Hunkeler was born on June 1, 1935, in Cottage City, Maryland, a small, quiet suburban community just outside Washington, D.C. He was an only child, raised in a German Lutheran family. His father, Edwin Hunkeler, and his mother, Odell, were middle-class, hard-working people living in an unremarkable house at 3807 40th Avenue. By all accounts, Ronald was a normal boy. He attended school, played with friends, lived an ordinary American childhood in the post-war years. But there was one person who made Ronald's life extraordinary: his Aunt Harriet. Aunt Harriet was a spiritualist, someone who believed in contacting the dead, in the existence of forces beyond our world. She doted on young Ronald, and he adored her in return. She taught him about the supernatural. She showed him how to use a Ouija board. She told him that death wasn't the end, that spirits could reach across the veil if you knew how to listen. Ronald was fascinated. And then, in January 1949, Aunt Harriet died. The grief-stricken 13-year-old wanted desperately to contact her one last time. So he did what she had taught him. He turned to the Ouija board, hoping to reach her spirit. He got an answer, but it wasn't from Aunt Harriet. On January 15, 1949, the Hunkeler family began experiencing disturbances in their home. It started with sounds: scratching, tapping, dripping water with no source. The noises seemed to follow Ronald, emanating from the walls and floors of his bedroom. Then, objects began to move. Ronald's bed would shake violently at night. Chairs toppled over in his presence. Household items slid across tables and flew through the air when he was nearby. The family consulted doctors. They found nothing wrong. They visited psychiatrists at the University of Maryland's mental hygiene clinic. Ronald underwent 2 rounds of testing. No abnormalities were detected. He was prescribed phenobarbital as a sedative, but it didn't help. Desperate, the Hunkelers turned to their Lutheran minister, Reverend Luther Miles Schultz. Schultz invited Ronald to spend the night at his house to observe the phenomena firsthand. What he witnessed that night convinced him that something genuinely evil was at work. Schultz wrote to Duke University describing how chairs moved with Ronald and one threw him out. His bed shook whenever he was in it. The Reverend attempted a Lutheran rite of exorcism. It failed. Ronald's condition was deteriorating. His behavior was becoming more violent, more disturbing. The scratching sounds grew louder. The objects moved more aggressively. Schultz made a recommendation that would change everything. The family should seek help from the Jesuits, the Catholic Church. Father E. Albert Hughes was a Catholic priest serving at St. James Church in nearby Mount Rainier, Maryland. When the Hunkelers came to him in late February 1949, Father Hughes was skeptical at first, but after meeting with Ronald, something changed. During their conversation, a telephone flew off Hughes's desk and across the room, with no one touching it. Ronald spoke to him in Latin, a language the boy had never studied. The temperature in the office dropped noticeably whenever Ronald entered. Most disturbing of all, Ronald couldn't take his eyes off the Bible. He stared at it with an intensity that unsettled Father Hughes deeply. Father Hughes became convinced this was a genuine case of demonic possession. He contacted his superiors in the Catholic Church and requested permission to perform an exorcism. After reviewing the case, the church granted his request, an extremely rare decision that indicated how seriously they took the situation. In late February 1949, Father Hughes arranged for Ronald to be admitted to Georgetown University Hospital, a Jesuit institution in Washington, D.C. There, in a hospital room, Father Hughes prepared himself for spiritual warfare. The exorcism began. For 3 nights, Father Hughes attempted to drive out whatever had taken hold of the boy. He strapped Ronald to his hospital mattress. He recited prayers from the Rituale Romanum, the Catholic Church's official manual for exorcisms. He commanded the demon to leave in the name of Christ. And Ronald became violent. His body convulsed, his mattress shook uncontrollably. He screamed obscenities in that strange, diabolical voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. And then, on the 3rd night, Ronald broke free of his restraints. He tore a jagged piece of metal spring from the mattress and slashed at Father Hughes, cutting him deeply across the shoulder and wrist. Hughes required over 100 stitches. The priest never attempted another exorcism again. The family brought Ronald home, hoping the ordeal was over. It wasn't. In early March 1949, something new appeared on Ronald's body. Deep red welts and scratches formed on his chest and ribs, spelling out a single word: Louis. His mother, Odell, saw this as a sign. St. Louis, Missouri, was her hometown. Perhaps taking Ronald there, away from the house where it all began, would help. The family made the journey. They settled temporarily with relatives in the Belnor neighborhood in a beautiful colonial-style house on Roanoke Drive. From the outside, it looked like any other American home. Brick exterior, white shutters, neatly manicured lawn. But what would happen inside that house would become legendary. A family member reached out to Father Raymond J. Bishop, a 43-year-old Jesuit priest who taught at St. Louis University. Bishop examined Ronald on March 9, 1949. He witnessed the scratches appearing on the boy's body. He watched as Ronald's mattress moved on its own. Father Bishop knew this was beyond his expertise alone. He contacted his close friend, Father William S. Bowdern, the 52-year-old pastor of St. Francis Xavier Church. Together, they decided to perform a new series of exorcisms, properly documented with multiple witnesses, following every protocol the church required. On March 11, 1949, Father Bowdern arrived at the house. That night, after Ronald fell asleep around 11 p.m., Bowdern and Bishop began praying a novena for the intercession of St. Francis Xavier. Bowdern blessed the boy with a first-class relic of the saint and placed a relic-encrusted crucifix under Ronald's pillow. Then they left the room, leaving 5 family members to watch over the sleeping boy. Minutes later, a loud crash echoed through the house. The family rushed back to find a large bookcase had moved across the room. A heavy bench had toppled. The crucifix that had been under Ronald's pillow was now at the edge of the bed. Ronald's mattress was shaking violently. This was just the beginning. Over the next several weeks, Fathers Bowdern and Bishop, assisted by Father Halloran and other Jesuits, performed more than 20 exorcisms on Ronald Edwin Hunkeler. They moved him to the Alexian Brothers Hospital in South St. Louis on March 21st, believing the hospital's sacred environment might aid the process. Father Bishop kept a detailed 29-page handwritten diary of everything that occurred. His entries chronicled phenomena that challenged everything the priests thought they knew about the natural world. Ronald would enter trance-like states during which his personality completely changed. A deep, adult voice would speak through him, mocking the priests, cursing God, speaking in Latin phrases despite Ronald having no training in the language. Words appeared scratched into his skin: hell, evil, mysterious symbols, the image of a pitchfork. He exhibited unusual strength. During violent convulsions, he broke Father Halloran's nose. He threw heavy relics across the room. He had to be physically restrained by multiple grown men. Objects moved on their own in his presence. Crucifixes were thrown to the floor. Holy water would be knocked from the priest's hands. His bed would shake so violently during prayers that witnesses described it as impossible to explain naturally. 48 people witnessed these exorcisms. 9 of them were Jesuits. All of them were convinced they were witnessing genuine demonic possession. April 18th, 1949. It was Easter Monday. The priests had been battling for Ronald's soul for over a month. 20 exorcisms had been performed, countless prayers recited, holy relics laid upon him, crucifixes held before him. Nothing had worked. Ronald's condition had only intensified. The voice speaking through him grew more defiant, more blasphemous. The phenomena grew more violent. But on this night, something different happened. At 11 p.m., while wearing saint medals and clutching a crucifix, Ronald suddenly screamed, "Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael. I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave this body in the name of Dominus, immediately, now, now, now." Witnesses reported hearing a sound like a shotgun blast. Ronald's body went into one final violent spasm. Then he fell quiet. He opened his own eyes for the first time in weeks, and spoke in his normal voice. He is gone. Ronald claimed to have seen a vision, Saint Michael the Archangel wielding a flaming sword, slaying a dragon. The priests believed it was a sign. The demon had been cast out. 12 days later, the Hunkeler family returned to Maryland. The disturbances ceased. Ronald's behavior returned to normal. He attended school. He graduated from Gonzaga High School in 1954. He never experienced the phenomena again. In August 1949, an article appeared on the front page of the Washington Post. The headline read, "Priest Frees Mount Rainier Boy Reported Held in Devil's Grip." The article was vague, giving no names, only hints of the extraordinary events that had occurred. It was based on leaks from church sources, likely from Reverend Schultz, the Lutheran minister who had first been involved. One person who read that article was a 21-year-old student at Georgetown University named William Peter Blatty. Blatty never forgot that story. 22 years later, in 1971, he published a novel called The Exorcist. He had consulted Father Bishop's diary. He had spoken with Father Bowdern. He took the events of 1949 and turned them into fiction, changing the boy to a girl, consolidating the locations, adding Hollywood horror elements. The book sold over 13 million copies in the United States alone. In 1973, William Friedkin directed the film adaptation. It became a cultural phenomenon, earning Blatty an Academy Award and a Golden Globe. It was the first horror film ever nominated for Best Picture. But the real Ronald Edwin Hunkeler wanted nothing to do with any of it. After graduating from high school, Ronald Hunkeler became a brilliant engineer. He went to work for NASA at the Goddard Space Flight Center, where he spent nearly 40 years contributing to the Apollo space missions. He even patented special technology that made space shuttle panels resistant to extreme heat, helping put American astronauts on the moon in 1969. He married. He had 3 children, 2 daughters and a son he named Michael, after Saint Michael the Archangel who had appeared in his vision. By all accounts, he lived a completely normal, successful life, but he lived in fear. His identity as Roland Doe was an open secret among the Jesuit community and certain academics, but his real name was never publicly revealed while he was alive. According to his companion, Ronald was terrified that his colleagues at NASA would discover the truth about his past, that he would be known forever as the Exorcist boy rather than for his accomplishments. "On Halloween, we always left the house," she told reporters, because she figured someone would come to his residence and know where he lived and never let him have peace. He had a terrible life from worry, worry, worry. On May 10, 2020, Ronald Edwin Hunkeler died of a stroke at his home in Marriottsville, Maryland, 1 month shy of his 86th birthday. He was cremated. In December 2021, the Skeptical Inquirer finally published his real name. So what really happened to Ronald Edwin Hunkeler in 1949? Was he genuinely possessed by a demon, or was something else at play? Father Walter Halloran, one of the assisting priests who witnessed the exorcisms, was later asked directly if Ronald had been possessed. His response was telling. "I can't go on record. I never made an absolute statement about the things because I didn't feel I was qualified. All I did was report the things that I saw." When questioned about the claims of Ronald speaking in tongues, Halloran admitted, "Just Latin, I think he mimicked us." He said there were no demonic changes in the boy's voice, that when the boy struck him, it wasn't with extraordinary strength, just what an agitated teenager could muster. Skeptical investigators have proposed alternative explanations. Could it have been mental illness? Conditions like Tourette's syndrome, schizophrenia, or dissociative identity disorder can cause involuntary vocalizations, violent movements, and personality changes. Could it have been a hoax? Some suggest Ronald, an only child grieving his aunt's death and desperate for attention, may have faked the phenomena. The scratches could have been self-inflicted. The Latin could have been mimicry. The objects could have been moved when no one was watching carefully. Investigators found inconsistencies in witness accounts. No independent, non-Catholic observers documented the phenomena. All evidence comes from people who already believed in demonic possession. And then there's this. According to Ronald's companion, he told her near the end of his life that he wasn't possessed, it was all concocted. But can we trust that claim? Was he simply trying to distance himself from a traumatic childhood experience, or was he finally admitting a decades-long deception? The truth is, we'll never know for certain. What we do know is this. A 14-year-old boy experienced something in 1949 that was severe enough for the Catholic Church to authorize over 20 exorcisms. Dozens of witnesses, including multiple Jesuit priests, doctors, and family members, reported seeing unexplainable phenomena. Whether those phenomena were supernatural, psychological, or fabricated, they were real enough to traumatize everyone involved. Real enough to inspire one of the most influential horror stories ever told. Real enough that Ronald Edwin Hunkeler carried the weight of them for 71 years. The house at 3807 40th Avenue in Cottage City, Maryland, where it all began, was abandoned in the 1960s and later demolished. The room at Alexian Brothers Hospital, where the final exorcism took place, was sealed shortly after the events. The hospital itself was demolished in 1978. But the house on Roanoke Drive in Belnor, St. Louis, the beautiful colonial home where most of the exorcisms occurred, still stands today. It was sold in 2005 for $165,000. New owners live there now, perhaps unaware of the history within those walls. The case of Roland Doe remains one of the most documented exorcism cases in American history. Father Bishop's 29-page diary is preserved in Jesuit archives. The witnesses are gone now, but their testimonies remain. And The Exorcist continues to terrify new generations, unaware that the story began with a lonely boy, a Ouija board, and a desperate attempt to contact the dead. Whether you believe Ronald Edwin Hunkeler was possessed by a demon, suffering from mental illness, or perpetrating an elaborate hoax, one thing is undeniable. Something happened in those houses in 1949, something that couldn't be explained, something that changed everyone it touched. The echoes of those events still reverberate through our culture today. This has been the story of Roland Doe. If this journey into the darkness moved you, please like and subscribe to Echoes of Darkness. In our next episode, we'll explore another case where the line between the supernatural and the psychological becomes impossible to distinguish. Until then, stay vigilant and perhaps leave the Ouija board alone.